This sermon is from Edgewood Baptist Church. You can find more information about us online at ebc-edmonds.org. Thanks for listening.
Of God. I happen to believe in a higher power. I'm not sure whether it's science-based or it's not religious, and it's not spiritual so much as I believe that there is more to reality than that we understand. I think we have a very, very limited understanding of reality. I mean, take a look at quantum mechanics.
Yeah.
It's hard for our brains to grasp what's going on. But I believe that there's something more than what we see, that that there's more than this.
So if you were to speculate or even just guess from your perspective, how would you describe him?
How would I describe what?
The higher power.
I have no, well, I guess there are two things. Number one, I think that that the universe has a consciousness and we are evolving towards God. I think that humankind is nowhere near where we could be spiritually, and that with any luck, we might survive as a species long enough to evolve in that direction.
Yeah.
I personally think that God is, if you want to get sort of religious, God is love. I think that there are, on a spectrum, you've got love on one side and fear on the other, as opposed to love and evil. Mm-hmm. I don't think that there is any evil. I think that there's fear, and fear is evil, and God is love, and that's about where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
And
I think it's very difficult to prove there is not a God. I think that's a fool's errand, and good luck bringing lunch.
I mean, the existence of like a higher power, or someone that is a creator of this universe.
Yeah.
Why, I don't think this universe was necessarily meticulously created as much as just put in motion. And what we are experiencing here is just that set of circumstances put into motion. Now, whether or not that is attributed to a creator or not, I can't really say. But I will say this, I think there's a very powerful force in this universe that I attribute to the power of love. And I think that love is light that powers this universe in a positive way. And if we can all align ourselves to this feeling of love and greatness and light that really is the energy that drives this universe, and I think that is non-negotiable. The drive behind this universe is a loving force. I don't really think it was put into motion by some grand scheme. I don't think it was put into motion by some grand entity. I just think it was in motion. And we can either recognize it as in motion or we can deny it.
Have you ever considered the question, does God exist? I'm supposing most of you here have, but maybe some haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it. Have you ever thought about how you would engage in conversation with someone who has a different view of the existence of God? Next week, we're going to talk about what God is like according to Scripture, and is it possible to get to know God, and what are the answers there? Today we're looking at, where did the universe come from? So just went out and we talked to some folks. There'd be some things that they said that you would agree with, right? There'd be some things that you disagree with. How would you engage in conversation? It's interesting, in these interviews, we didn't have anybody who said the universe came out of nothing. We didn't have a direct question from the person a few weeks ago who said they didn't believe in God. They didn't answer this question directly of where do you think the universe came from then. But Lawrence Krauss how many of you know that name? I'm just interested. Lawrence Krauss, the atheist. Okay, just a few. He wrote a book and called it A Universe from Nothing. And there was a lot of discussion about it. The question came, can something come from nothing? I mean, that's a key philosophical question. Did the universe come out of nothing? You'll either decide, yes, the universe came out of nothing, or you'll decide, no, the universe has always been here. As Christians, we'll see that we believe that the universe did come out of nothing, but not by nothing. Does that make sense? That it came out of nothing by God. God used no pre-existing material to create the universe. Lawrence Krauss believes that the universe came out of nothing, but then he defines nothing in 3 different ways. And I placed on your notes some websites where you can look at some debates that I would encourage you to take some time and look at about this whole discussion. I told you last week I've spent long hours listening to a lot of talk about nothing. We believe that it makes a difference what you believe about the universe. And we welcome people to ponder those questions. For me, for a lot of my life, I considered this idea that God created is kind of self-evident. I didn't spend a whole lot of time thinking about what are the other options. Then I got to college and I started to explore what are the other options. If God didn't create the universe, then how did the universe get here? That make sense? And the options are either the universe has always existed, that there is no universe. Did you know that's an option? That we just imagined the universe, that we just projected out of our own imagination. That the universe is God, a pantheism. Or a form of dualism where there's a good and evil force that created the universe. Sound familiar, by the way? Why do we believe what we believe about these things? I want to take a quick look at what Scripture says. And I think you'll find a lot of people will be interested in what the Scripture says, as long as we don't force it down their throat. And the good thing about Christianity is we don't believe anybody can be forced to be a Christian. True? Genesis 1 through 3. In the beginning, God, what? Created. There's been a lot of discussion about this word used here for created. God created. He didn't use any pre-existing material, I don't believe. I think we see here that God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and the darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. We're going to read more later. Romans 4:17 says this, "As it is written, I have made you a father of many nations in the presence of the God in whom he believed, who gives life to the dead and calls into existence things that do not exist." Or how about the Gospel of John, chapter 1 through 3. "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and all things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made." Ephesians 3:8-9. "To me, though I'm the very least of all the saints, this grace was given to preach to the Gentiles the unsearchable riches of Christ, and to bring to light for everyone what is the plan of the mystery hidden for ages in God, who created," what does it say? "All things." Or Acts 17:24-25. "The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. Notice he says, God doesn't live in a temple. It's very interesting because of what we just saw in the comments at the beginning of the sermon. There are things that we would agree with as Christians. Right? One is that the universe is more than we can comprehend. Would you agree? We can't get a telescope big enough to see all the universe. And we can't get a microscope powerful enough to see all the details of the universe. This universe is amazing. I taught philosophy class, as some of you know, and I remember students saying at the end of philosophy class, I do believe in God, but not the small God I was taught about in Sunday school. What's he saying? And I remember Sunday school curriculum we used for years from Desiring God that asked the three questions. Does God exist? If God exists, what's God like? And what does God require of us? I remember they were talking about the character of God, and the kids learned that God was incomprehensible. That there are things about God that blow our minds. It's past our ability to comprehend. Amen? There's stuff that you go that, wow, this is just more. Now, we believe, as we'll see in other weeks, that God has revealed things about himself to us, and we'll talk next week about can we come to know God and how do you come to know God. But we believe that God is bigger than our minds or vocabulary. And reality is bigger than we can find words to describe. I brought 2 bags of things that I was going to ask the kids about. First is this. You know what's in here? Legos. And we got some. If I poured these out, could you guys make something out of them? They're cool. We got lots of them in here. All right? Smiley face, because we like Legos at our house. You can make something beautiful and intelligent. Now, if I took this here and poured this out, could you guys make something out of this? The kids will say there's nothing in here. Well, there's actually something in here. It's air, right? But we can't create out of nothing. When I'm going to keep my bags here, we're going to get back to them. Millard Erickson, in his book on Christian theology, says this: we begin our examination of the doctrine, talking of the doctrine of creation, we begin our examination of the doctrine by noting that it is creation out of nothing or without the use of pre-existing material. This does not mean that all of God's creative work was direct and immediate, occurring at the very beginning of time. So it's not saying that everything was created out of nothing. It's God created something, and then he created stuff out of the something. Does that make sense? So how many people here have children? How many believe that your children were made by God? When you say that your child was made by God, you don't mean that he just randomly made your child out of nothing and poof, he showed up or she showed up. True? You believe there's a process. You've studied a little biology by which procreation takes place. True? You've just learned about what we call secondary causes in philosophy. In other words, God was the primary cause, but he used secondary causes. Make sense? Now, let's just stop for a second and think about where babies come from. We're not going to go too long here. But there is an answer that you would give to your 4-year-old, is there not? And that's different than the answer you'd give to your 12-year-old. And it's a different answer than we might talk about in pre-marriage counseling. And it's a different level of detail than you might talk to a couple who's struggling with infertility. And would you agree with me that there are things about procreation that the smartest minds in the world have not yet discovered and the way it works? Right? In the same way, when we talk about creation, there are some things that we can come to conclusively, but nobody will exhaustively understand creation in this earthly life. There's just so much to learn. Would you agree? Now, let me say one more thing about creation before we move on. Creation is not something that God made out of God. It is not a part of Him. We're not pantheists. We don't believe the chair is God. Which, by the way, is mind-boggling, is it not? To believe that God is everywhere, but He's not everything. I don't even know how I get a grasp on anything eternal. Have you ever tried to figure that out? There's places where your brain goes, enough. Now, this is important because when folks like Lawrence Krauss talk and say it's their goal to drive superstition out of the world, and he's very angered, if you watch the debate, by theologians. He thinks he's proved that the universe could come out of nothing. But he defines 3 categories of nothing. I don't know what he would do with Aristotle's definition of nothing. Aristotle said nothing is what the rock thinks of. In the New York Times, philosopher of science and physicist David Albert said of Lawrence Krauss's book that it failed to live up to its title. And he criticized Krauss for dismissing concerns about his misuse of the term nothing. Commenting on the debate caused by the book, Sean Carroll, the physicist, said this, opposing this question: do advances in modern physics and cosmology help us address these underlying questions of why there is something called the universe at all, and why there are things called the laws of physics, and why those laws seem to take the form of quantum mechanics, and why some particle wave function, and he goes on to talk about all that. And then he says this: in a word, no, I don't see how they could. In other words, how can science, which science is based on, I'm speaking now, but science is based on observation, correct? True? We observe things, test them. How can science tell you why we have a universe? We can't observe it. Physicist George F.R. Ellis, when asked whether Krauss has solved the mystery of why there is something rather than nothing, noted that the belief that all of reality can be fully comprehended in terms of physics and the equations of physics is a fantasy. Krauss does not address why the laws of physics exist, why they have the form they have, or in what kind of manifestation they existed before the universe existed. So, I.S. Scally has analyzed the main technical arguments in Krauss's books, and he has further concerns, concluding that many of the claims are not supported in full by modern general relativity theory or quantum field theory. So there's a lot of discussion about it. Most of you here, you're not philosophers. You may not care about that. You should care about what we're just going to say in Genesis, because why it matters what we believe about where we came from should be evident to us. If you believe that we evolved from nothing and we're heading to nothing by nothing, then there is no meaning to life. You get that? I just evolved from nothing and I'm heading to nothing. The doctrine of creation has implications. We're going to talk about that. Before we do, let's turn to Genesis 1 and let's see what it says there. And let's remember that when God speaks to us, He has to put it in our terms, right? He's not untrue, but he has to put it in terms that we can get. If he explained it in full scientific terms, none of us would have any idea what he was talking about, right? Some of you know my dad's an electronics engineer. He has, I don't know, lots of patents. And he'd get excited about a new idea, and he'd take me out to breakfast, and he'd draw on his napkin all the things he was going to do and how he was going to do it. And I would just sometimes stare. And I have to remind him, Dad, I don't have the educational background to follow everything you just told me. Now, if that's true of my father talking to me about electronics, can you imagine when God comes to talk to us about the creation of the world? Sometimes he has to say, I'm going to put this in a way you get it. And then I'm going to encourage you to use your minds to explore the universe. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Let's begin it this way. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw that the light was, what's the word? And God separated the light from darkness, so God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. So God created light. How did he do it? I didn't know. Do you think light's cool, by the way? You know, the speed of light, you fascinated? One of the things I would agree with Lawrence Krauss, if I had a chance to sit with him, is I would agree with him that this universe is really cool. And I would agree with him that some people, and certainly some people, even within the church, have just not marveled at how great the universe is that's created. Amen? Light is just really cool. Well, let's keep going. And God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven, and there was evening, and there was morning, the second day. And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together in one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Do you ever marvel at water? Isn't it amazing? So, some of you don't know, but I flew out to Iowa. We got an offer on our house. We accepted the offer, but one of the conditions was that they examine the pool. So I had to go help them open the pool. I don't know if you've ever had a pool, but if you have a vinyl lining, you keep water in the pool so the lining doesn't come in over the winter months. And you put antifreeze in all the lines. Well, the person buying the house didn't know that, and they were afraid there was something wrong with the house. So we opened the pool. Something wrong with the pool. So we opened the pool. So this week I've been putting chemicals in the pool and getting the pool water cleaned. The whole time that I was in Iowa, it rained. It was colder than usual and raining. I guess I was meant to feel at home like I was still in Seattle. And then it got nice here, so I don't know. But have you ever pondered the wonder of rain? Right? As I'm sitting there working and trying to figure out, all the chemicals needed to, get the bound chlorine free and all those kind of things. God's just showing, this is how I created the world. Look how rain does. I just take the water up here and drop it over there, and it's now pure and it's clean. Isn't it amazing? Does God encourage us to study his creation? Verse 11, God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants, yielded seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, according to its kind on the earth. And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the third day. And God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be the signs and for the seasons and for the days and the years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens and to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was, and there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. Do you think in that God's trying to tell us exactly how the sun and the moon work? I don't think so. Well, why didn't he tell us that, the moon's just reflecting the sun's light? Because that's not what he's getting at right here. Does that make sense? It'd be like if I told you, when your 4-year-old asked you that question about where babies come from, how come you didn't talk more about cell division in the early conception? Because it wasn't relevant to what we were trying to discuss. Verse 20, and God said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. You guys like going to the zoo? Isn't it cool? Then God said, let us make man in our own image, after our likeness. And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with its seed and its fruit. And you shall have them for food, and to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life. I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. I want to stop there, but if we go on to the second chapter, he talks about the seventh day, and that God took a rest. And then he retells the creation story from the point, kind of zeroes in on the creation of man in the garden. Let me just make these observations of what the Bible teaches. And then you and I have to decide if we accept that. First, the Bible teaches that there never was a time when there was nothing. There's always been something. That something is not just a something, it's someone. It's God. Right? The uncaused cause. You have to have something eternal. You've got to decide what is eternal. Do you believe? Unless you're going to believe that something can come out of nothing by nothing. Second point. The Bible teaches that everything that was brought into existence was brought into existence by God. God brought it all into existence. Somebody read on the Facebook, and they were a little confused about this last week when I talked about corruption and chaos. The fact that the creation has been corrupted and chaotic does not mean that God made any mistakes in the creation, correct? It also doesn't mean that God isn't sovereign. God has this way of overruling our mistakes. But everything that's been brought into existence has been brought into existence by God. This does, by the way, mean that we can rejoice in the created world. We can go, wow, look at that sunset. By the way, when I say, wow, look at that sunset, none of you are going to say, what are you, an idiot? The earth isn't flat. You should say, whoa, look at that rotation of the earth. Right? So we use phenomenological language ourselves, but everything was brought into existence by God. All that was created by God, for God, and for our enjoyment. 3, the implications of the doctrine of creation are important. First implication is we should worship the Creator, not the creation. We're kind of wired to worship something, don't you believe that? It's interesting, even these atheists and agnostics start worshiping the universe and talking as the universe has intentionality in what it's doing. I find that really interesting. But we shouldn't worship the creation, we should worship the Creator. We should look at that. I had the other side of this face here on my Legos. Can people see that? Because that's the face that happens if one of my children builds something with Legos and the other one decides to just come over and destroy it. Right? God created the universe and He gave mankind dominion over the earth, and we need to take care of that creation. So we should value the creation, and that's point B. We should take care and value creation. Make sense? And we should love our neighbor in how we treat it. I don't know if you've been to some places in the world, but I've been to slums where they just let filth run in the water, and it's killing people. And sometimes the people who are making profit, that are spilling that waste into those areas, don't care because they care more about their profit than they care about people or the creation that God's made. We need to speak out against that and say that's just not right. Right? And then the last, I'll ask that the team can come up here. We're going to close in some songs. But there is purpose and meaning in human life if there's a creator. If there's no creation, then you can't talk of purpose. I don't know how you can talk of anything really if you're just going to say that we evolved from nothing and are headed to nothing. I don't know why you're going to trust your own mind. Here's what I wanted to leave people with. If you're a young person here and you're going to school, or if you're an old person here and you're watching television, whenever you hear people speak of purpose and meaning, think about, in fact, whenever you hear them talk about anything, what are the assumptions that are being made? There's always assumptions. Is that not true? The atheist is putting faith in something. He's putting faith in his ability to understand just via science everything. What are those assumptions, and do you think there's any validity to them? That's what we're encouraging people to do.